How did you understand your blueprint? How did you come to your blueprint? And you can start from the long version, and you can also start from the moment that it happened, and or take me all the way through. But what led you here, and how did you know? Did you feel it younger and then it was uncovered? Was it revealed to you more spontaneously? How did you come to this, and what did it mean to you when this was revealed to you?
Mhm.
Begin to
I
understand.
can I can go from where I am right now and then go back to now where I
Nice.
feel it's headed.
I love that.
And with everything that I'm going to describe, it's now having the hindsight, but also having foresight at the same time.
Mhm.
So for me, when I look back at who I was when I was 23, when I was in the struggle, or actually it was 21, between 21 and 22. 23 was when I formed the first company. But when I look back to that moment during 20 and 21, where I had the drive to become an entrepreneur, knowing that I didn't want to stay stuck in school, knowing that I didn't want to work for anybody, knowing that I wanted freedom. And I can't think back to what were my drivers at the time other than wanting freedom and wanting to create and knowing that I had the capacity to do so. So when I look back, I could say, okay, that was the beginning of the blueprint already forming itself very early on. I can even go back further, and I used to sell things in high school when I was 14. So it's just like I just always had that in me. Now, being 10, 15, there's so many different levels of the journey, but just say 10, 15 years later, where all of those strengths keep playing out and I keep building on them. They were all the blueprint. What has gotten refined, which is why now I'm creating the Awake blueprint, is that I'm more aligned to who I am on soul level. I'm more aligned to what my soul wants to experience here on earth, as opposed to that beginning of the entrepreneurial journey when I was 23 and I opened the tax franchises. That was more, how do I show up in 3D society? How do I show up in the world and have a skill set that is offering service to the world in a way that people needed? And not doing market research or analytics. So I'm not a business person in the sense of that's how I went into business. It was an opportunity that unfolded for me, which is why now when I look back, that was part of the blueprint. That was part of the soul's calling. Because when I was in the homeless shelter, my cousin called me and told me she found this job and that I should connect with the general manager and have a set up a meeting with him. And when we set up the meeting, it was 6 minutes away from the shelter. So it was one of those divine moments. Obviously, me being in the position that I was at the time, it was a job. It was okay, now I can find a way to eat and get out of the shelter, because I was at a point where I was asking myself, why am I here? How did I end up here? I'm not going to be happy living on food stamps and trying to support this 5-year-old. This is not what I want her to see me as. This is not the environment that I want her to be in. So when that job came through for me, it was more, I was in the survival mode of I need a job, and not like, oh, this is going to be a dream experience for me. But it ultimately was, because I was able to go to that job and very quickly turn into the general manager of those locations, and then very quickly have the franchisee ask to partner with me. I was thrown into entrepreneurship, but it was something that I had always wanted. So the blueprint was unfolding. But it took that journey of learning all of those skill sets and then being in that environment and then feeling a misalignment in that environment for me to ask, what is my deeper calling? What is my deeper purpose here on earth? And how do I actualize that? I can't tell you what asked me to ask myself those questions, other than me naturally asking myself those questions my whole life in different ways. But I think that we all do that. I feel like we all do that. We just put them in context to, what do my parents want me to be? Like, what feels best for me to take up in school? Things like that. So we're always asking about our blueprint, but we're asking in a way where we're trying to have the reflection of others to show us what that blueprint could look like. And for me, since it was easy to separate from my family, because of the experiences that I didn't have anybody to ask but myself. And that was what allowed me to open that communication with my soul, what I also call higher self, which is the thing that shows you that bigger purpose and that bigger calling for what you're here to do. That is the thing, and it is you. And I knew it was me. So when I got into spirituality and I started to tune into different modalities, different people sharing about their gifts, their abilities, I naturally started to reflect on mine and what it felt like for me. So I decided to sell the businesses because I just couldn't do it anymore. I feel like my body physically shut down. I couldn't wake up and go into the office anymore. I started to pass off everything to my general manager, and she was amazing. She had trained with me for 4 years. She was amazing. So I was able to make that transition and then sell those companies and then have time off but I was also in that hyper productive mode where I didn't want to take time off. I wanted to use the money from that sale to go build something else right away. And I went into that, and it was supposed to be a franchise of gyms. Again, because I had the comfort in that framework. That deal didn't go through. So when those deals don't go through, those are catalysts and like check-in points for us in our soul. Our soul is going, hey, redirect, hey, do something else. We don't know it at the time. I didn't know it at the time. Those end up being our biggest blessings. But if we just allow ourselves to surrender and not try to fight against what's being taken away from us, that's what surrender is in spirituality. Just don't fight. Like don't. I get the image of like a kid pulling a teddy bear, like two kids pulling a teddy bear, because they both want it. It's like, if you just let it go, right? And then usually a parent comes and gives you something else or whatever, like, here, you can be happy too. That's how I feel that exchange with higher self in the universe. So if you can allow that as an adult, when businesses are being taken away from you, or partners are being taken away from you, you'll still be taken care of with what you want. And I can't tell you how I came to those conclusions other than I just didn't have fight left in my body to try to fight for something that was being taken care of. I was entering a state of just such exhaustion that I was ready to let everything go. And that's what caused me to go deeper into spirituality. That's what allowed me to align very deeply with higher self, because I left the businesses, I left my marriage, and there was silence. I was able to have deep silence, and I was able to sit with myself deeply and be with nature very deeply. And that's when all the downloads started coming in, and I started to tap into this seeing of how all of my gifts and how all of my abilities in entrepreneurship, I was sharp, I had skill sets, I had what's this word, charisma, like all the things that people say this is what makes you a good entrepreneur. But I also had the contrast of, that's not really me. I'm not this. I don't like to talk to people, really. I don't want to put on this persona. What is this thing that doesn't feel good for me, that makes it feel exhausting? And being able to sit in that, I was able to synthesize how the natural desire of my soul can meet what my skills are and what my gifts are, and that I could find a way to blend them. And that's how I became a healer and started to then focus my work on healing, and then naturally wanted to turn it into a business, but then have to also go through all of those stages when you're deepening in spirituality, the stages of, why do I want to make money off of this? All of the other things that you have to look at, what your drivers are, and why you want to create from different places. Those questions that I sat with and that I asked myself is what allowed me to create A.W.A.K.E Blueprint, because I knew that my entrepreneurial drive was coming from a place that was deeply connected to my soul. I just did not know how to fit it in the models of society. And then I knew I wanted to create a new model. I still am, like, I'm in the process of building that out. That's what this whole thing is about, for us to be shown what that looks like. When you're allowing yourself to tap into your soul's gifts, when you're allowing yourself to wake up, and what does wake up mean? To recognize what the truth of reality is and what are the false belief systems that we're being fed. That's it. Like, we're all waking up in a system where there's truth, and then there are false beliefs that we are being fed. And awakening to our blueprint allows us to align with the truth of the system, the truth of how the system is designed, the truth of what it means to be a person in their own personal power, what it means to utilize your own ability to create in order to serve humanity, in order to serve your soul's desires and the lessons that your soul is here to learn. Because we're here to learn how to be in relationship with each other. We're here to learn how to serve each other. And when you can combine that with your entrepreneurial ventures, then you're aligning to that, what I call the awake blueprint. And when we allow ourselves to do that, we create a whole new system here of exchange. But it was this process of me going through many different stages of life, tuning into many different skill sets and abilities, and trying to synthesize them into one, because I wanted to be a whole being. I didn't want to pretend to not have healing abilities when I was in an entrepreneurial venture. I did not want to pretend to not be an entrepreneur when I was in spiritual circle, because I just felt like I was separating myself even more, as opposed to feeling the wholeness and the oneness that was coming from the deeper sense of my spiritual journey, that we are meant to be whole. We are all meant to operate from a place of wholeness. And I had to discover what that meant for me. So in any ways that I was hiding an aspect of myself to fit into one space or another, I knew I wanted to let all of that go. And I know that it's not just for me, it's like even the people around me feel so free to just express how they want to express. And especially coming from spiritual community, where sometimes we have to, in the beginning, we could conform to this identity of having to like sit on a pillow really still, right? Like really still with our legs crossed, which I'm not against. I still do that, and I will do that for the rest of my life. But that's not all that it is. That I am expressive, I am explosive, and all of that is my spiritual energy. I am genius. I like to create. I see multidimensional shapes and figures, and I want to be able to put that together. No, I don't want to just let my mind go. I want to let the negativity go. I want to let, in any way that I'm acting from greed or gluttony or self-sacrifice, I want to let those things go. But I don't want to let who I am as a whole being and as a creator go. I don't want to do that. And sometimes when you're in spiritual spaces, at least the ones that I went to, now we have great ones, but I'm just saying in the beginning of the journey, it didn't necessarily allow for all of that. And that's when I decided to create the space for myself. And when I created that space for myself, I called in some really beautiful beings to play with me in that. And then we started to co-create. And from that, the Awake Blueprint was created, because then I could see how all of our blueprints were designed to activate each other. We were designed to highlight the other gifts and the abilities that we each had to create a whole, and to come from this place of not wanting to conform to societal conventions, but also to be in society and to show up as radiant, loving human beings in society, and see how to offer that sense of peace and love and wholeness to another. And for me, that comes through my ventures. It just naturally came through my ventures. It came through anything that I was creating. It comes through the philanthropy also that I do, which is what allows me to see the impact that an entrepreneur has on society and what that really means, and what the future of that could look like, instead of it just being about consumption instead of it being something that creates imbalance in the system, where you see an entrepreneur that can generate a lot of resource and doesn't necessarily funnel that resource into the best of directions. I don't think that's done from a place of ill intent. I think it's done because we don't know how to create those funnels where wealth is being distributed properly through society so that it could balance itself out. For me, well, that's big scale. Like, that's big scale awake blueprint, because the more of us that come online in that blueprint, that's what naturally will get created. But it has to start on the individual level, the individual knowing their power as a creator, that they can create in a way that feels completely aligned to their soul, and that they will be compensated for that. In fact, they need to be compensated for that, and that they shouldn't fear being compensated for that, because the compensation is going to come in many different ways. And when you are aligning to the nature of your soul, when you're aligning to that blueprint, the compensation actually compensates everything around you, because you're not coming from a place of needing compensation from a place of lack. You're coming online and you're allowing yourself to be compensated in equilibrium with a system that is naturally abundant, and you allow for the expression of that. And that's what we're flipping in the system, because the system teaches us the reverse, that we have to create from a place of lack. And coming online to that blueprint shows you that you naturally, as a soul, have access to the gift, the abilities, the flow of energy that allows you to self-source, the flow of energy that allows you to literally create from nothing, to create from your essence. And you activate the innate power and the intelligence of the universe in being in that expression. So allowing yourself to come into that awareness that you have this blueprint is going to free you from whatever bondage, whatever limitation you're operating from, that makes you think that you can't function from this level of expression from your soul. And when that, like, that's like opening the floodgates. That's what it feels like for me. Like, you tap into that, you allow your body to be able to harness that and hold that through your meditative work, through spiritual work, through expressing yourself creatively through a venture. That's like a trifecta for me. And that's what this blueprint is. It's this trifecta of energy that you, or trinity of energy, if you want to go real deep on the spiritual side, but it just allows you to harness that power of the natural energy of your soul and put it into a framework that fits into society. So you don't look like some, like, you're not holding a Bible yelling on the side of the street, like, come home to God. Like, which I like when people do that, but it's a different way to do it. Like, it's a way that is softer and more gentle and allows us to expand into the love of the universe. It allows us to expand into that frequency of abundance of who we are naturally, and we're just expressing who we are. And then when you could reflect that to another individual in society, that's where the chain reaction occurs. And then when you can reflect that through your venture, that's when a bigger chain reaction can occur. And then that's when we create a whole new system. I'll pause there.
This is super beautiful, Hema. Yeah, it's super, super beautiful. Do
Wow.
you have anything off the top of your head from that? Like, I was like swimming in it, right?
Yeah, one that was incredible. First off,
Yeah.
like, wow. But one of the curiosities early on was like, I'm curious about your internal feedback system. So like you said, like you came into your own. So what was it that you were able to trust that fed you? Like, what was it internally that you were able to trust that like fed you enough to trust it more than what the environment and what the environment was showing you?
Mm-hmm. The surrender that I experienced when I sold the companies and started to go into deep meditation, and the union that I felt with the energy of source, the union that I felt with the connection, and it feeling so crystal clear, and it feeling so much like the truth and so much like home, that I feel like in the very beginning, I allowed myself to drink it all the way up. And I allowed that to be my new baseline. And there were stages of that. So in the beginning, I allowed myself to drink it up and fill all the way up. And that was what allowed me to leave my marriage, to go, oh, this doesn't feel like that, so I don't want it. The business, oh, this doesn't feel like that, so I don't want it. And I let that carry me for a few years, but I had to keep tapping in deeper. And that's where I had to work with deeper limiting beliefs and issues around unworthiness to now grow into the venture that I'm planning to create now. And scaling the ventures the way that I'm scaling, and also the way that it's naturally scaling, that's asking me to step up. So for me to stay completely aligned, I know that feeling of truth in my body. And I know when something feels like pain. And I unraveled all of the ways in which my mind, my body, and maybe even my soul confuse pain and pleasure, because that's part of the human condition, is that we confuse pain and pleasure. And especially if we've been hurt as a child or wounded, which we all have. It doesn't matter if like somebody yelled at us when we were 3, we take that as a immense amount of pain. And that's where we get confused, because we don't know unconditional love. We're not given enough unconditional love. But when you come back to your blueprint, when you come back to your own connection with yourself and with all that is, you start to remember what that feels like. So you have a new gauge and you have a new baseline. And if you love yourself enough, you won't tolerate any less. And I feel very gifted to have been able to love myself. And I do want to mention my daughter in this, because I think that it was a gauge for me to go, would I treat my daughter like this? And if I wouldn't treat her like this, why would I treat myself like this? And so why would I do anything that doesn't feel like this? And that was a compass for me, having that reflection. So then it became easy for me to turn down offers or things that people would not be able to turn down because it was X amount of money and it would provide certain security. For me, it was a turn off. It was no, this, I can tell intuitively that this does not align with my soul. So I'm going to say no. You're always given that choice point. That's also the beauty of the human experience here. We have free will and we have choice. It can be a beauty and it can be a detriment, because if you're constantly making choices that go against your nature, that's when you're spiraling down. But we can easily flip and make choices that continue to align with our true nature, and you spiral up. And then you kind of get addicted to spiraling up instead of being addicted to spiraling down. And I've had many experiences early in my life that I would consider spiral down. And the more that I would spiral down, the more it would hurt me. And I would just naturally go, and I'm more than this. And I'm going to fight as much as I can to go back up for air, because I don't want to drown. I think there was something inside of me that just could not accept being in a shelter and saying, this is me, like this is me, I quit, I give up. There was just something inside of me that was like, no way, don't do this, this doesn't feel good. And also change it. Also very grateful that I have a place to sleep. Very, very grateful that this is available. And no, this is not the ideal environment for a child to grow up in. I really want to change the system at the same time. So in me having all of that life experience is what gave me all of the contrast and the balancing, and then me having that direct union with my higher self and source, the feeling connected to all that is. I didn't feel that God was punishing me and that's why I ended up in a shelter. I was like, I made some fucked up choice. I don't know if I can censor or not. I made some messed up choices in life, and let me see how to correct those choices. And even now, me being in a cycle now with the crypto market, and me, this is my first really big wave as an investor, having to write it down, not taking it out on myself, going, oh, I did something wrong and I deserve to have lost X amount of capital. And no, it's just like this, it's this thing where there's a deep sense of understanding that everything is something to be experienced and not assigning it a positive or negative value. So staying in the neutrality of the experience. And I think that comes from being a parent. If you want to be a loving parent, you want to be in neutrality as much as you can with your children. So you naturally enter that state. So that was really good training for me. And then I applied it to all of the areas of my life. And I even apply it now with how I'm training or delivering training. I use that same essence of what I learned as a parent to be able to like feel other people and feel what is needed and how to see the other person or hold that space so the other person feels seen and met in whatever that needs to look like and feel like for them. So I can give description on my end, how I know how to orient, but that's going to look different for somebody else. But I think just the fact of us witnessing somebody that knows how to orient allows us to open up to tune in deeper to what that orientation is for us, to know how to navigate the question that you asked specifically about, you know, how do you know what it feels like and how to keep following that.
We've got 7 minutes. There was one thing that I wanted to ask, you know, when you did take the position in the tax, initially in the tax office, and then end up owning your own, like, you tapped into something that really was your blueprint also. Like, you were meant to have a certain flow of business. Like, your energy was meant to be out in the world like that. And that must have been a really incredible time when also, like, this is coming online for you in a way that you sort of felt, but you're actualizing for the first time. And yet also your awakening is coming on at the same exact time. Like, I think that that's this powerful juncture where we find entrepreneurs or people in business at the moment, and they don't know how to give one up over the other, because they both have truth in them, but we have a lot of beliefs to, like, let go through them.
Mm-hmm. This is the future that we're all living in now. The future where you get to see your blueprint unfold in front of you. And that's why I'm highlighting it, because sometimes we don't have the expanded awareness to recognize that's what's happening. And I feel like when we get to these transition points, there has to be the word that I'm looking for, there has to be this harvesting of all that we learned with the past venture to be able to move it into the new venture. And I feel like my gift in having been able to jump through many different industries, which I didn't even realize that's what I was doing, is jumping from one industry to another. I was just letting myself explore what I was drawn to, and finding really cool people. That it was more of, I was being drawn to the people in those industries as opposed to the industry itself. So when I first found the people that I wanted to learn from in the tax industry, it was so fun working with them that I knew that I wanted to go in that direction. But then when I found the healing work and the people that I was meeting in the healing industry, it was very easy to go, okay, wow, this feels better. Like, these are the people that I want to play with here. So I think that is naturally going to occur for entrepreneurs, but all the insecurities that we haven't dealt with, when you're making that jump, you have to deal with those insecurities. That's what I outline with the blueprint. You just have to recognize what those insecurities are, and you have to build up that confidence. And there's no other way to build up the confidence than in being in practical application. But if you're conditioned to stay in the mind and not be in action, then you're in action. You know what I mean? And a lot of spirituality keeps us in inaction. And so it is learning how to balance that. And part of what I designed in the process is balance, knowing how to balance everything that you learned from phase 1 into phase 2, bringing it into phase 2, bringing it into phase 3, because that's how you're going to allow yourself to make the jumps that you need to make, and that it doesn't have to be as dramatic. Like, these are quantum leaps that we're making because we're living in quantum times, period. We're living in quantum times. The moment that we went from light bulb to Bluetooth, like, boom, quantum leap, right? Humanity is in quantum leap mode. And then from cell phones to not AI to what's next for us is quantum. So your being in your body is going to be operating in quantum reality. Most of us are, that are listening to this. I'm not saying, there's a whole spectrum that's not, and they're not listening. And that's why I'm not speaking to that. That's somebody else's realm to speak in. I'm speaking to those of us that are here in this realm, and that we know we operate multidimensionally, but we don't know necessarily how to connect the dots in that. I feel like I have worked my ass off for 4 years to connect the dots, period. There were too many dots in air, and I was like, I cannot be floating here in the ethers multidimensionally and not have my dots connected and be fully in my body. I love my body. I want to be here in my body. I love my womb. I love the space that I've been giving, and I want to honor that completely. So naturally, allowing that energy to download in me connected all of those dots. And then I could see, oh, look, here's my future vision. Here's the past. Here's where I was. Here's where I want to be. Oh, you know what? Here's the belief system that's actually keeping me stuck in the middle. So I'm neither here nor there. And here's how I need to create the line and the pathway that drops that belief system that shoots me into that future reality. Not sure if that's answering your question, but like that's just how I'm feeling, how I'm flowing. And that's what I want to help translate for people, because I've seen enough people in the past 4 years that operate like that if they could just sit their genius ass down and like if they could really just sit down and not putting any blame on them, putting blame on their operating system and how it's designed, how we were designed as human beings, is to work, essentially to work against us. Our DNA works against us. Our brain, the programming works against us. But if we were able to decondition, reprogram, sit down, sink deep into our bodies, we would be able to connect all of those dots. And then it wouldn't even be a matter of letting go. It's like taking a step. So for me, everything's in a place of flow where even if it is a challenge, it's the only way is forward. The only way is forward. There's no going back. I could look back if I want to look back. And every time that I look back, it's such a beautiful push forward. That's it. It's not, oh my God, I'm getting pulled back into a past of who I used to be or what I used to be. I can look back and cherish every moment of that journey and use it as fuel to propel me into what that next jump needs to be, even if it looks completely different. So making the jump from being a healer to then being a hedge fund manager with no financial background. Like, how do you even do that? How do you even do that? It has to be a call. It has to be a calling. And I didn't let any insecurity get in the way. Not to say that I didn't have them. It was very clear to me that, look, I'm not I'm gonna be very like vivid and frank. I'm not a white male in America from Ivy League to know what to do in these industries. But you know what? I'm not going to let that stop me, because I'm being called to invest and to learn it. And I'm not going to let the programming from my DNA that says, no, you actually have to be a slave and stay small, stop me from making that leap, because I can come into the awareness of my bloodline, of my lineage, of what I was born into, as opposed to what other people are born into, and how they make that work for them. I'm going to see how to make it work for me, and not use it as a disability, not use it as something to disempower me, but to actually fuel the power that I need in my being to go. And here's where we make a change. And here's where I use my soul's energy to equalize that shit, to equalize it, because we need to show up how we need to show up, regardless of what we were born into, regardless of what the challenge is. On a soul level, we have massive amounts of energy that we can tap into, and we get to unlock those levels at any time.